Hello everyone and welcome to Wine List Live. I am Isabelle, I'm head of wine at Wine List. And today tonight actually, we're talking about our 2 September wines. So those two are Bise from Château Payral, which is a lovely, very orange coloured wine. And the red wine we're going to talk about is Ganadero Tinto, which is our red wine this month. So as you can see on the side of your screen, you can see all the comments on the side. So you can type, comment, say hello. If you're watching this back afterwards, you can see everyone's comments about the whole thing. But hello to everyone, lovely to see you all. Hi Anne, already in there with the comments. And Sam and Charlotte. So what we're going to be doing is, it's an hour-long session. The first 20 minutes are very much talking about how to taste wine, going through our tasting cards. And you will have one of these with your bottles of wine. So we're going to talk through how you go about looking at each of the characteristics, how you go about looking at the aromas. And we're going to talk about that for the first 20 minutes of this session. And it's based around beginners. So if you've never done a wine tasting before, that's absolutely fine. We'll show you how to go through it. And if you have done lots of wine tastings before, as I can see everyone in the comments, hi Timmy as well. Done many wine tastings before, but it's nice to have a refresher and sort of remind yourself how to drink wine. Do you ever forget? I forget how to drink wine. So that'll be our first 20 minutes. Then at exactly 20 past, I'll put in the comments below so you can always skip ahead if you're watching it back afterwards. At 20 past, we'll be talking about Bise, and at 40 minutes past, so 22, we'll be talking about Ganadero Tinto. So you've got 3 whole segments and you can watch whichever part you want to and skip to whichever part if you don't want to drink 2 entire bottles of wine in one evening, but I think that's a great idea. Fiona, Wine List Fiona is here as well. She'll be smiling at me from the corner of the corner sofa. So hello to everyone, hi Lucy as well. So we're basically going to talk about how you taste wine. And what you need is a glass of wine to do that, so I'll pour it out. I'll pour one for you as well, don't worry. There we go. So, the best thing to do if you're doing a wine and food pairing this evening is possibly to hold back on your food for now, just because sometimes food can affect how you taste your wine, what your wine tastes like as well. So you can hold off as long as possible, and then I'll let you dive straight into the food. But the reason why I'm saying that is because orange wine and food is just a match made in heaven. It's like with rosé, you always just want to sort of have rosé nicely chilled and you just knock it back. But orange wine is like the exact opposite of rosé. You just want it with food. It makes it really wonderful. If you're thinking about what temperature your orange wine should be, I'd probably say between 10 and 12 degrees. So you want it not fridge cold, but a little bit warmer than that, so you can leave it out of the fridge for a little while. So now you've got your glasses. Should you cheers everyone? Cheers! Cling! Cheers! Oh, happy Tuesday! It's so nice drinking on a Tuesday. Ooh. So Tim loves the new format. It's so organised. Man after my own heart, Tim. The organisation starts here, everyone. So if you look at your tasting card on this side, you have lots of information about it. So we'll delve more into this in about 20 minutes time when we're talking about the orange wine. But on the other side, we're going to look at the characteristics. So the top row of characteristics is what your wine is basically. When you break your wine down into its characteristics, it means it's really easy to figure out what sort of wines you like. So we'll start to break it down. As soon as you know you like something with full body or low acidity, then you can start asking stuff about that in restaurants and wine shops. It's like speaking the language of wine. You know exactly what you want to say. So the first one is colour. And colour is exactly that. It's looking at the colour of your wine. And looking at the colour of your wine can tell you so much about it. I think this is a really good month to talk about colour as well, because we've got an orange wine. Sorry, I just really like orange wine. But you can tell so much from the colour of your wine already. So the way to look at your colour, instead of holding it up to the light like this, which is what you do in films and TV programmes, they like to look up at the light. All that's doing is seeing if your wine is clear or cloudy. And as you can see, can you tell that this is cloudy? If you look at the bottle, you can see it's really, really cloudy. There's loads of tiny, if you hold yours up to the light, there's loads of tiny little particles floating around in there. And it's because it's completely unfiltered. So when you hold your glass of wine up to the light, it's more of a thing they did in the olden days when they were seeing if it's a well-made wine, because a well-made wine in the olden days, sort of 100 years ago, they'd go through the process of filtration and make it a little bit more refined so that it was clear. But these days we've kind of learned, with all the food laws and regulations, it means that your wine isn't going to be poisonous, it's not going to kill you, it's going to be delicious. And it means that people aren't so fussed about whether wine is clear or cloudy anymore, because you can get some really fun ones that are completely unfiltered. So yeah, I'm very jealous of the food pairings as well, everyone. So the way we're looking at colour, we can already see that it's cloudy, it's unfiltered, it's telling us that it's a bit of a natural wine, this one. And then we can look at colour. So if you hold your piece of white paper and hold your wine over the top at an angle, be careful how much wine you've got in your glass. It might all fall out onto your paper. But by holding it at an angle like this, just looking about 45 degrees and looking over the top of the wine, it means that you can compare, rather than comparing wine to the colour of your walls or to different colours in the room through your glass, you're comparing it to exact bright white. So you can see exactly what the colour is. When you're looking at white wine, you're looking more sort of, is it very, very lightly coloured? You know, when you get a very sort of light, young Pinot Grigio and there's barely any colour to it, super, super light. And it usually means they're really young, really sort of fresh, neutral wines. Then the more yellow you go, so it sort of goes lemon, butter, all the way to sort of honey, amber coloured when you get to the real sort of very colourful side of it. That usually means, it indicates a lot for you, so you can start to know about what your wine's going to taste like before you even take a sip. So usually with a white wine, the more aging it's had, or the more barrel aging it's had in an oak barrel, or the more skin contact time it's had, the more bells and whistles and accessories it's had put onto it, the more colour it's going to have. So you know your wine's going to have a bit more of an impact the more colour it has. This one's got loads. So that's why you want to look at colour, because you want a clue before you have to take a sip of wine. Because if you know that you don't like wine that has absolutely no colour to it, or that has loads of colour to it, then you don't want to take that sip. It avoids lots of mistakes with wines. So the next thing we look at is tannins. And tannins, oh, I'll tell you about colour with red as well. With colour with red, you're sort of looking at how opaque it is. So if it's very sort of clear and light and see-through, or going all the way to being fully opaque. You can even do it, I don't have my red poured out yet, but one of the ways you can do it is by holding your glass, holding your thumb like that, and then looking over the top. And if you can see your thumb, or you can see your hand underneath, it usually means it's quite light in colour, it's very see-through clear. But the less you can see your hand underneath your glass, the more opaque it is, the deeper in colour it is. And you also want to look at how sort of vibrant red cherry or bright purple it is, magenta, or whether it's going down the scale and it's getting a bit more of a brown tinge to it. That also indicates whether it has a little bit of aging behind it. So there's all these things that we can do just by looking at wine. Tim's asked, is orange wine an industry term, or did I make it up personally? Definitely an industry term. Yeah. It's all your colours of wine. You get white, you get red, you get rosé. You should call it pink. We'll say rosé. And orange. And that's all 4 colours of wine. That's the full scale. Someone was talking to me about blue wine recently, but I'm not going to let blue wine into the scale. That's it. It's not going in. Just 4 of them. So the next thing we'll look at is tannin. And tannin is about how much your wine dries your mouth out. So it's only with red wines and orange wines. They're the 2, not with rosé or white. But it's when your mouth dries out, so you can feel it on your tongue, your gums, the roof of your mouth, and it should feel a little bit like dry paper, like you really need a glass of water. And the next one, the opposite of tannin, is acidity. So tannin dries your mouth out, and acidity makes your mouth water as soon as you bite into a green Granny Smith apple. And you think about how much that makes your mouth water. That's the acidity coming from the apple. It's called malic acid. It's inside all fruits that you'll ever eat. So when you drink wine, you've got the malic acid. It's making your mouth water. But different grapes and different sort of winemaking techniques differ on how much acidity is inside your wine. Acidity is one of my favourite ones because it balances the wine, especially if you've got tannin. You want acidity to sort of balance out, and all that drying sensation is balanced with your mouth watering loads and loads. Sweetness is the really scientific one. So sweetness is ever so confusing because a lot of wine, when it's really delicious, you think, oh, it smells of fruits, it smells sweet. But it's all about the taste. It's all about the exact amount of grams of sugar per litre of wine. So a dry wine is 90% of the wines that we drink, especially here in the UK. But a dry wine is anything between 0 and 10 grams of sugar. So it's quite a lot. Usually, I think almost all of the wines that we have at the wine list, almost all of them, are really dry usually. They're usually less than 3 grams of sugar per litre. And when we say per litre, a bottle of wine is 750 millilitres. That's only 3/4. I can't work out 3/4 of 3. I should have said 4 as an example. 3/4 of 4 is only 3 grams of sugar. There we go. So that's sweetness. So when you're medium, that's 35 grams of sugar. And the very sweet wine at the very end is 120 grams of sugar, which is just a little bit more than a Coca-Cola. Very, very sweet. They're like dessert wines then. Then body. Body is, it's forget the flavour, forget what you're tasting. Just think about how the wine feels. So when you're tasting a wine, take a sip of your wine now. I'll do it as well because I've forgotten what wine tastes like. Oh, that's really nice. When you do body though, imagine you have 2 glasses of milk in front of you. So light bodied wine is like skimmed milk. It's very clean, it's very light, it's like water, it doesn't have much of a texture to it, just slips very easily. Full bodied wine is like full fat milk. It's really textured, really full, rounded. You can really feel it on your palate. And then if you're in the middle, it's sort of like semi-skimmed milk. And as ever, if you are non-dairy, just telling everyone that Fiona's non-dairy, she says that almond milk is like skimmed milk, like light bodied wine. Almond or coconut milk actually. Yeah, much thinner. Coconut milk and almond milk, and my favourite, oat milk. Much fuller, it's got much more of a texture to it, it's much rounder. That's like full bodied wine. So when you're thinking about your body, forget about flavours, forget about everything, it's just that. And when you're looking at all these characteristics that we've talked about so far, what you really want to look at is, do they balance out? And if they don't balance out, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that the winemakers created and tweaked that wine. It's a bit like having a recipe, like making a big pot of casserole and just tweaking everything slightly so it's just perfect. And what happens is you need to balance your acidity, sweetness, tannin, body, and if you get all of that right, then you've got nicely balanced wine. But if you have more acidity, it's usually a fresher wine. If you've got more tannin or more body, it's usually one of those wines that you sort of hunker down with in wintertime on the sofa. Please could you pass me that? Can you hear me now? Because everyone hear me now? We're doing a test. I might be a little bit too loud now. Is that okay? I just had a microphone issue. Has everyone got me? You got me back. We're doing okay. Oh, I'm so bad at tech. I'm so sorry, everyone. Is that a little bit too loud for everyone? Or is that okay? I'm 10 seconds ahead of all of you, so I only realised sort of 10 seconds after. Yes, Emma says we're back. Yay, wonderful. All I said then was I was talking about finish on wine, and finish is basically the most important thing. So I get so many, oh nice, everyone's coming back. Also nice to see you all, hi everyone. So I get lots and lots of wine samples all the time. And, oh, there's a background noise now. My goodness. I just need a tech person.
At least they know it's live.
At least you know it's live. So I get lots and lots of wine samples all the time, and there's probably about 25 on my desk right now. And because you get so many, whenever I have, it's so nice to hear from everyone. I feel like you're all my tech support. This is lovely. Whenever I'm trying a wine, I think the speediest way to know if it's good or not is basically looking at the finish first. Counting how many seconds you can really taste the flavour for on your palate. Just think about the flavours in your tongue, and definitely don't think about the acidity, the tannin, any of that. So what you want to do is take a sip, swallow it, count how many seconds, and if you're at 5 seconds, it's pretty good wine. 7 seconds is really good wine. 10 seconds is amazing, and anything more than 10 seconds is just absolutely outstanding. It's very good. Sorry for any lag. I don't know, I think it's just my computer. I think she's having a breakdown, which is okay. So the last thing we'll look at is the aromas on the aroma profile, and this is where it gets interesting. So what you want to do is, the perfect amount of wine to have is about there. And I know that doesn't sound like a big glass, but you can just keep topping up. You want to pour it to the widest point of your glass so you have the biggest surface area of wine in contact with air. So all the aromas are drifting up off there. The best styles of wine glass, any wine glass is fine, but the best styles you can have for tasting are the ones that sort of go out here and then taper up. And the reason is because all those aromas are being trapped inside there, and they're being trapped by that tapered part. So when you put your nose to the glass, you can smell them all. They're all stuck inside. You can help yourself by swirling it around inside your glass. So that will really help you with aromas. And we split them into 2 circles. So on the left-hand circle, you've got the primary aromas, the main aromas. These are all different types of fruit. And you've got, on the right-hand side, it's more like gooseberry, lemon, peach, lots of fruits you find inside white wines. And on the left-hand side is figs, blueberry, red currant, things you find inside red wines. You can get a blend of each one sometimes, especially when you have an orange or a rosé wine. And every single wine that you'll ever taste will have these aromas. Even if you're a rubbish winemaker, and I've had some rubbish wines, especially at the pub. Sorry, pub wines are good. I'm being really mean tonight. But all wines will smell and taste of fruit. If it doesn't smell and taste of fruit, it means your wine's gone off. There's been a fault in it, so you can usually send them back to a wine shop. And on the right-hand side is where it gets interesting. So these are really complex, bizarre, weird flavours, things like mint, coffee, toast, licorice. And these are when a wine is really good. So you want some complex flavours if you want a complex wine. Doesn't necessarily mean your wine's bad if you don't have complex flavours. And if you do have flavours from here, you want balance between the 2 circles. If you have a glass that tastes completely like licorice and cinnamon and doesn't taste like any fruit, it's a bit heavy going. So you want some sort of nice, maybe a bit of red cherry and blueberry thrown in there to balance it out really, really nicely. So we're going to look at all of these, and I timed it so well. That was so much practice yesterday. 20 minutes exactly, with an audio mistake in there. Sorry, everyone. And we'll be talking about, exactly 20 minutes past, La Bise. So this is La Bise. It has the most beautiful label on the front. I really, really love this. It's got 2 birds kissing. And La Bise is the French word for a kiss. And it also means it's a type of, like a little wind, but a very light sort of wind. It's probably like a breeze. A very similar word actually, bise and breeze. Like a very lovely summer breeze. So this wine is an orange wine. And what is an orange wine? Has everyone had orange wine before? Have you not had orange wine before? This is a very mild sort of orange wine. So orange wine basically is when you have white wine, you take white grapes, you press them really lightly for the juices, don't let the grape skin touch the juice, and you've got lovely, refreshing white wine. Red wine is red grapes, you press it for the skin contact, you leave it to macerate with those skins. So the more skin contact you have, the deeper and sort of more tannic your red wine will be. So you've got lovely red wine. Rosé is red grapes made like white wine, so it's very light, fresh, easy drinking. And orange wine is when you take white grapes, but you make it like a red wine. So it's all about leaving the white grapes and the white juices with skin contact. From your skin, oh, I just have a diagram. Hi. So from your skin, this is the grape. I can only do it with this hand. I'm backwards. This is the grape. So the inside, you've got the pip, you've got the grape in the middle there, which is where you get all the juice from, and it's always green coloured. And where do you get the colour from? The skin. So the skin is full of phenolic compounds, and when you press the juices and leave it with the skins, they absorb these phenolic compounds. So when you make a red wine juice is not red colour, but it absorbs that colour from the grape skin. It also absorbs a little bit of body, small amount, but mainly it absorbs tannin. So when you're doing the same but with a white wine, you're absorbing the tannin, the colour and a little bit of body from that grape skin as well. So it means that you have this wonderfully sort of orange coloured wine, should have a little bit of tannin in there. So the more you do this with your grape skins, the longer contact you have, the more colour you're going to have. So you can completely judge an orange wine by its colour. This is a really light coloured orange wine. You can see some that look like a Negroni or an Aperol Spritz. They're deeply, deeply coloured, and that usually means they've had more skin contact, so they've had more time to absorb more colour from the grape skin, and in which case they're absorbing more tannin from the grape skin and possibly a bit more body too. So in which case, what's the colour of this one like? When we're looking at the scale, let's ignore white wines as a concept. Let's look at this scale and imagine orange wines on this scale. So at the very sort of light end of orange wines, that'll be a very sort of lightly hint of orange, just a little bit of skin contact, possibly like a week or two. At the very intense side is going to be those really, really big orange wines. They are fun wines. It usually means that they're really good for food pairing because they'll have such a deep colour to them. They'll have lots of flavours, lots of impact, and they'll also have really big tannins. So it means that food with tannin is really nice. You kind of need food when you have like high tannin wines. What do you think the colour is like on this one? It is, Tim got wine glasses from us. That's so nice. I just smashed one of mine, so I'm going to buy some more from us. This is a really light, if you're already saying it, this is quite a lightly coloured orange wine. You can get much, much deeper ones. So I'd only put this sort of a quarter of the way up the scale, maybe a third of the way up the scale in terms of colour. It's super, super light, this one, for an orange wine. It has had 6 months of skin contact, which is a long time, but it can depend on the grape variety. So when you're thinking about red wines, you think about sort of Pinot Noir or Malbec. Two completely different ends of the scale in terms of colour. And the reason why they have such different colour pigmentation inside there is because Pinot Noir has very thin skins. It is a different style of grape. Malbec has much thicker skins. So when you're leaving it to macerate, it's all about the thickness of the skin, how many phenolic compounds are inside that skin. So when you're extracting something from a very thin skin, you're not getting many phenolic compounds, you're not getting much colour pigmentation or tannin. When you have something with a thicker skin, you're getting much more deeper skin colour, more pigmentation basically, and far more tannins. So this Bise is a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. And these are two grape varieties that are often blended together, but they don't, even though it's 6 months, it's not a huge pigmentation of colour. You can get different grapes that have a much, much deeper colour to them. For instance, we have one in the shop at the moment called Château, and it is orange. If you actually, I put together a box this afternoon. So if you do like this orange wine and you want to try some more, we've put together a full box of orange wines, and God, they go through all the phases. You've got like Le Bise, which is the lightest end. It goes all the way through to Arcazzelli from Georgia, which is beautiful, super, super orange. So if you like orange wines, you want to get more into them, this is like the rainbow spectrum of orange wines. But I agree, yeah, Sam and Charlotte put a 4. Yeah, I'm about a 3 or 4 out of 10 there. So from orange wine, you get your colour, you get your tannin. Has anyone noticed their tannin on this? Tim's asked what section would orange wines appear in the shop. They usually have their own section. They'll usually be next to rosé. It's usually they sort of have white, they have red, they have rosé, and they'll have an orange section as well. And they'll always be in their own section. They won't be hidden in somewhere with all the others because they're their own category. And when we talk about orange wine, it sounds like this completely new thing because it's coming so much into fashion recently. But really, orange wine is some of the oldest wines in the world. So when wines are first created, sort of 6,000 years ago, they think the very first ones, there's some stipulation, but they think the very first ones were either rosé or orange, but the first wines were definitely not white or red. That's just what's been in fashion for the past 200 years, maybe 300 years. But yeah, orange wines were the very first ones to be around, and that was in Georgia. And it's because they just left them with the grape skins. They buried them deep under the earth inside Kevri. This one is made inside ordinary stainless steel. So it is really fresh. So we've got tannin. How much tannin do you think you have inside this one? You can kind of judge it based on your colour as well. So when you're looking at colour with an orange wine, you can really sort of tell how much tannin is going to be inside there as well. And I think quite light. It's not too tannic, is it? It's not really drying your mouth out. Really subtle tannin. You can still feel it a little bit. It's got a bit of like bite to it. And it means that it's really good for having with food. Tannin and food is a perfect combination. We had noodles and, you know when you have a food that you just don't know what to pair with the wine, it's a really tricky one. Orange wine is always the answer. It's like the perfect in-between wine for everything. So you've got your colour, you've got your tannin from your grape skin, and you can sometimes get a little bit of body as well. So it's a bit like, orange wine is like if a white wine wanted to be a red wine. You've got a bit of more body behind there. And what do you think the body is like on this one? How does it feel? Does it feel more like your skimmed milk? Does it feel more like your full fat milk? Does it feel sort of somewhere in between? Think about the texture on there. Denise has put low, and I think she's talking about tannin. Yes, I've put like a quarter of the way up, a 2 or 3 out of 10. Very subtle. Tim's just about tasting the tannin now, and it's because it's so subtle. It's only just coming through. You don't really notice it's there. It's adding an extra layer of interest on top of this wine, making it loads to think about, really. So what's the body like on this one? I think it's like a 3 or 4. Yeah, I think a 3 or 4. It's got a really nice amount of texture there, but without being too much. And looking between our body and tannin, they both have a little bit, but not too much. So when we're looking at our acidity now, if it's going to be really high acidity, it's going to mean that the balance of this wine means it's a really refreshing wine. It's something to drink on a sunny day. If the acidity is going to be quite low, that's still completely okay because our body and tannin is quite low. It can afford to have quite a low acidity as well, so it's still going to feel balanced within that whole spectrum. Hannah agrees. Fairly light in body. Oh, George is having a tagine. Oh, perfect. And when you think about traditional Georgian wines, this is a French one from the south of France, but when you think about traditional Georgian wines, Georgian food is so flavoursome, and they make their wines so that it goes really, really well with local food. You sort of have thousands of years of people making wine and eating food together. So people, of course, make wine and food that goes perfectly together. So what's the acidity like with your wine? I think, did we skip acidity? in the first 20 minutes if you're new to this. We skipped acidity in the first 20 minutes because I forgot about it. But the best way to do it is just by the dribble test. So you take a sip of wine, swallow it, and then open your mouth and tilt your head forward like this. And you count how many seconds it takes before you really need to close your mouth before you're going to dribble everywhere. So I'll do it with you. Any advances on 4 seconds? Around 4 seconds? Yeah, we've got 4 seconds. 4 seconds, if it's straight away within 1 or 2 seconds, it means it's really high acidity. 3 or 4 seconds means it's medium high. More like 4 or 5 seconds is medium. Denise has put medium low. Yeah, I put medium high. I thought it was 4 seconds for me. It can affect everyone differently. Acidity affects everyone differently. It can depend on lots of different things because we're all built very differently. But what you can do is sort of adjust your scale to a similar area to everyone else's. So when you talk about if you want something low acidity, you're on the same wavelength as everyone else. Oh, we've got a medium, we've got 5 seconds. Alexandra thinks it's so glamorous. I think that's the wine, not me, but I'll take that. Thank you. 3 to 4 seconds, wonderful. And when we're talking about the balance between that wine, we have a much higher acidity than we have our tannin and body down there. So it means that it's a really refreshing wine, it's a refreshing drink. It doesn't need anything else to balance it out. You can just sit there and drink a whole bottle. It'll be wonderful. So, sweetness. Now we're talking about our balance. What is our sweetness inside this wine? Oh, Chris Denny says, yes, 4 seconds. Perfect. Sweetness inside wine, we're going back to how many grams of sugar per litre inside your wine. And it's really quite tricky to figure it out straight away, but what I find really helps is, it sounds really silly, but pinching your nose and tasting the wine. 90% of when you smell and taste, well, when you taste is coming from your sense of smell. And when you're smelling all these sweet ripe fruits, it can really throw your brain off. Your nose is working much faster than your palate ever does. So it makes you think that you're tasting sweet aromas, but you're actually tasting almost no sugar at all inside here. It's very, very dry wine, this one. Yeah, super, super dry. It's really sort of cutting, it's very clean, isn't it? And speaking of that, let's get to our aromas. So it feels very clean, but what are those aromas that you're feeling on there? So if you did think that this wine had some sweetness then, what was the fruit that you were smelling and tasting that made you think it was sweet? Any answers? It's tricky. Whenever I have an orange wine, I always think, it's definitely not just my brain and my eyesight. I always think it tastes like oranges. Every single time. It's got nothing to do with oranges, but tangerine, that's exactly what I've written. Tangerines. It's like a very light, sweet, succulent orange inside here. Tangerines. And orange wines always tend to be a little bit orangey. I always think marmalade. Sometimes the heavier ones are much more marmalade-y. And marmalade, when you taste it, is very, very dry. Just like this. I've also put a little bit more tropical going on inside here because we're in the very south of France. Should I show you a little map of where we are? We are just about here. So Château Payral is a beautiful chateau. They've got a wonderful place. And it's just by, so you can see it on the left hand side, that is Bordeaux. And then when you go inland from Bordeaux, this is from Bergerac. And Bergerac is, well, it's Dordogne / Bergerac, but it's a very different area to Bordeaux because Bordeaux is so, so famous for having such big, expensive wines. And I always find you get such great value in this region because it's not well known at all. I always think they're the best places for it. It also means that it's really easy, well, not easy, definitely not easy, nothing's easy in farming, but it's much easier to be organic. So Isabelle and Thierry are completely organic. They've had this wine, well, they've had the chateau in their family. They've been winemakers for 7 generations. Thierry inherited this chateau when he was much younger in sort of 1992, and now they've got 2 sons who are all grown up and they're taking over the wines One day, maybe not quite ready now, but they're making some really, really cool stuff. Actually, I will show you a video. So I've got a video just here.
Hello, I'm Thierry.
Hello, I'm Isabelle, Thierry's wife.
I am the seventh generation of wine grower at the Château de Payral.
And we are the owner. This estate is situated in Dordogne, in southwest of France, and we hope you will.
That was really bad quality. I'll post that on Instagram tomorrow. You'll be able to see it. God, my laptop today. I'm so sorry, everyone. This is, yeah. So we've got, what's everyone saying? Alexandra's saying apricot. Sam and Charlotte are saying toffee apple. Ooh. We've got peachy, apricots, a bit yeasty, almondy. Absolutely, it's all these flavours going on inside. So when you're smelling it, really swill it around the glass, breathe it all in. You can get so many flavours from there. You've got sort of like citrus peel, like lemon, but not just fresh lemons, it's like lemon peel. I've also got melon, guava, it's getting a bit tropical. I've also put a little bit of I like to throw one pretentious one in there, but I put quince. You know, like when you have a really nice cheese board, you get some quince jelly. It smells like quince and tastes like that too. And all these flavours are actually really tropical. So because it's a Sauvignon grape variety, it's a it tends to be a very tropical grape variety in itself. So it says that, oh sorry everyone about the video. So tropical is going to be, it's going to be passion fruity tropical when it's white wine, but when it's turned into orange wine, it's going to change a little bit more. So you're getting more sort of guava. So when you have Semillon added inside there, it's a little bit richer. So that's adding sort of two different things to our wine. And with temperature and wine, so we're all the way down in the south of France, so the grapes are getting really, really ripe. They're intensifying in their sugar because you've got so many UV rays, it's really sort of working together. And the more UV rays you have, the more sugar it's producing, the more intense those flavours are. So the hotter your climate, the more tropical the fruit flavours. So we're getting guava, melon. Ben and Hannah have put, dare they say it, tinned peaches and syrup. I do like tinned peaches and syrup though, so yes. Oh, Denise is agreeing with the quince. Yes, wonderful. I'm very glad about that. So this orange wine is, actually we've got one last thing towards it, but this orange wine has mostly the primary aromas from the very first circle here. I've also added in a little bit of pear. If it was cooler climate, I'd say it could be a bit of gooseberry, but it's definitely more melon and guava than gooseberry. I put orange, and I also added a little bit of a floral quality as well, so rose. You can almost taste it in there. Hannah said that because quince jelly goes so well with cheese, could you pair this wine with cheese? Yes, that is the perfect way to think about wine and food pairing. So whenever you have a food that you want to pair a wine with, I always think of wine as the ingredient. So when you look at all these aromas that you've got written down inside the circle, what would you put those with in terms of food? So if you'd add a little bit of orange to duck à l'orange, there we go. Perfect food pairing, because you've got the tannin as well, so it's going to work with meats. When you have cheeses, it tastes a bit like quince jelly. It'll work really perfectly with that. So any flavour that you find inside your wine, imagine it's like an ingredient going with your food. It'll work really well. And the last thing we'll do on this wine is the finish. How many seconds can you taste this wine for after you take a sip? So, we'll do it now. This wine, while we're counting, it didn't have any aromas from the second circle, but it doesn't need to have any aromas from the second circle. You can see that Isabelle and Thierry are going for this really sort of easy drinking, very drinkable wine, and it's because they chose to have that much higher acidity. They've gone for a much fresher sort of wine. It feels a little bit summery. So they didn't have any of the complexity, but they didn't really need it in this wine. Not all wine needs complexity. It's like when people think an older wine is a better wine. It's not always necessarily the case. It's all about situation and wine pairing, and that's Exactly what I want on a day like today. It's lovely and chilled, 10 to 12 degrees, no complexity, very nice. Trevor's said, which is better, hard cheese or soft cheese? I would think a hard cheese would be really nice with this. You know when you have, Fiona says goat's cheese, but I think like a Comté, because you know when Comté is a hard cheese but it's very nutty and sort of almondy almost. I think there's so many flavours in this wine that it can really stand up to the nuttiness of that, because sometimes a white wine can lose out on that. But this has all the flavours, it can stand up to something with lots of flavours, and it's got that acidity to cut straight through everything. So we've got a 6, we've got an 8 on the finish. Good, perfect. I put a 7 exactly in between. Look at that. Wonderful. And you can also put your verdict here. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's a smiley face. Because I really, really liked this one. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much to Isabelle and Thierry. I'm so sorry your video didn't work, but I will post it tomorrow. Don't you worry. Oh, Alexandra put cinnamon. Almost, you know what? I think it's got a little bit like spices on it. I didn't quite think cinnamon, but I thought some sort of clove, like a Christmas cake. I think someone else wrote Christmas cake as well. Yeah, really nice. 7 seconds is a wonderful long finish for it as well. But we have to drink the next wine. Get it poured out. 2 minutes behind schedule, everyone. What's Tim going to say? So we're having Ganadero Tinto. And it's like, again, lovely label. Not to judge a book by its cover, but both of these have lovely labels. This one is a bull. So this wine is from Spain. I'll show you a little map of exactly where it's from in Spain. But you can see how central this one is. So Madrid is at the very centre of Spain. Madrid is, it's very hot in summer in Madrid, and it gets very cold in winter. So it's a really extreme climate where we are, but Bodegas Canopy is just sort of central here, and that whole area of Spain is on a big plateau. So this plateau is raised up. It doesn't look mountainous, but it is very, very high up. It's 450 meters in altitude, which is really quite high. And it's going to mean a few things about our wine. So the first thing we're going to look at is alcohol. We don't really talk about alcohol content on wine, but without looking at the label, I want you to tell me exactly what the alcohol content is on this one. So, oh, thank you so much, Thierry and Isabelle. That was really, really lovely. So this one is, it looks, you can't really tell what the alcohol is going to be just by looking at it, but what some people try and do with alcohol is look at the legs. I don't do that. I think the best way to read your alcohol in this is to take a sip. I don't know why my answer to everything is take a sip, try it. And what you're looking for is, you know, that little burn in your throat just here. So you know when you drink whiskey and you can feel that tiny little burn. So in whiskey, it's quite a big burn, to be honest. It lasts for a long time. But whiskey is sort of 50%, I don't know, it's huge. Wine's much smaller on the scale. So I'll give you the scale. It's probably somewhere between 9 and 16%. That's most wines. And you want to guess how much of a burn you're getting from this. The lower the burn, the less you're feeling it, the more likely it's going to be about 10%. If you're feeling more of a burn, it's going to be sort of 16. Fiona's saying 14. And she hasn't seen the label because it's on this side of the table. But how much of a burn you're getting, put it in the comments. So when we talk about legs, I'll explain that quickly, but legs are when you swill a wine glass around like this, and then you look to see the dribbles down the sides of your glass. And people say that they can figure out legs. It's to do with alcohol content, but it's a very unreliable source. So when you have legs on the outside of your glass, it's actually a complicated chemical theory. It's all about surface tension, and it's surface tension. It's the rate at which alcohol evaporates off the side of your glass. And if you're in a warm room like last week when it was 28 degrees, it would be completely different if you had the same wine and were drinking it today. So it's incredibly unreliable. It's always better to just guess it from the little burn in your throat. When you do your official wine exams, you get wines in front of you, blind tasting, and you have to write down exactly the percentage, and you're allowed to be 0.5% off. That's it. But it's a very fun pub game. I always play it in restaurants. God, I sound so boring, don't I? I promise I'm fun to go to restaurants with sometimes. But everyone's guessing about the same. 14, 13, 13, 13, 14. And it is, I can reveal, 14%. Well done, everyone. That was really good. You've got the point. Very well done. It's amazing how quickly you can train yourself up to know exactly the alcohol percentage on a wine. It just takes a lot of practice. So 14% on this one. And why is the alcohol that level? When you make a wine, you take grapes, grape juice, which is sugar. You add a little bit of yeast. Yeast occurs naturally in the vineyard, or you can add it from a little packet. And yeast is a kind of type of fungus, and it's a living organism anyway. And yeast eats sugar and creates alcohol and CO2. And it creates alcohol, that's the main bit though. So the more sugar you have inside your grape, the more sugar there is to be converted into alcohol. If you sort of stop your fermentation halfway through, you're going to have not as much alcohol, but a little bit of sugar left. Usually when we drink dry wines, perhaps that's why in England we love dry wines so much, but the drier your wine probably is because all that sugar has become alcohol, so it's all been transformed. This wine is 100% garnacha. Garnacha is the Spanish word for Grenache, and Grenache it's not quite as thick a skin as a Malbec, but it has pretty thick skins. So when we're talking about our orange wine before, it's going to have quite a nice amount of colour to it. It's going to have quite a nice amount of tannin to it. It's going to have a little bit of body to it. And because it's being grown in such a hot region inside Spain, it's going to have quite a lot of alcohol behind it, which is exactly what we've got. So we'll start breaking everything down. But when you start to research a wine, it tells you a few things, and you can, sometimes they don't mean much, but one of them, it says sandy soils. This wine has sandy soils. It has 45-year-old vines, and it's aged for 3 months inside French oak. So you can often read things like that on your wine. But what do they actually mean? So sandy soils is really important. I can actually show you a picture of how sandy these soils are. I'll show you two. Look at how sandy these are. Really, really sandy soil. And so it's a very, very difficult growing region. But difficult growing region doesn't always mean bad wine. It usually means really good wine, to be honest. When you give your grapes an easy ride, it means the grapes don't try so hard. It's a bit too easy to make a grape. You want grape with gusto, and that's what these have. So sandy soils they can't retain water very well, and they don't have many nutrients inside there. So you can sort of spin this. If you're a bit of a spin doctor, you can say, oh, nutrients are really well drained, and they're really pest resistant. So there's pros and cons for everything. It means that you can have loads and loads of rain and it won't flood. But it means that grapes can be a little bit sort of starved of water throughout the summer. No, you don't have pests, so it is much easier to be organic. And the last thing is they retain heat, which isn't so important in Méntrida in Spain when it's very, very hot in summer, but it is really important in winter and at night time. So when you have this 450 metre altitude, you've got a lot of sunshine, and as soon as it gets to night time, so the grapes are getting really hot, they're producing lots and lots of sugar with all those UV rays and photosynthesis, creating all the sugar to create all the alcohol. But what happens is at night time, the temperature drops right down. The sand retains some of the heat for a little while, but it gets very, very cold at night time. So inside this wine, we're going to look for a few things that are coming from the sandy soil. One of them will be a pale colour. And a pale colour, can you see this? Has anyone had a Grenache before? It'll be a pale colour because it's very nutrient poor in these sandy soils. And so you also don't have nutrients, you also don't have that much water inside there. So the grapes are really sort of struggling to grow properly. They don't really create that really thick skin. And because they're not growing that really thick skin, you're not getting as much colour pigmentation inside that skin. So even though we talked about garnacha is usually a sort of very pigmented and tannic wine because it's got such thick skins, in this region with these sandy soils, it means they're going to be a little bit thinner. You're going to get less out of them. So when we're looking at colour of this wine, what do you think it is? Hold it over your piece of paper. you can see if your hand, can you see your hand through the other side? You can kind of half see it, so I'm going to say it's sort of medium opaque, medium in colour, and it's got this slight brown tinge to it as well, like when red wines start to lose their pigmentation. So it's sort of medium in colour, this one, which you wouldn't really get from most Grenaches, or Garnacha Grenache, it's just different languages, French and Spanish. So it's a bit of a different colour, this one. What are the tannins like on it? So this is really tied in with colour. How much is this drying your mouth out? Oh, that's a fun wine, that one. If I was serving this wine properly, I mean, I've been sat down on the sofa for an hour now. If I was serving it properly, I'd probably put it in the fridge for about 20 minutes before serving it. Which is what I like to do with red wines anyway. Because when your room temperature is about 20 degrees, that's a bit too hot for your wine, so you want to sort of chill it down to about 16 degrees, especially this one. Sam and Charlotte have said 6 to 7 for the colour. Imagine what it's like. Really hold it against your white piece of paper. I do realise that it's dark outside as well and dark in a room. But imagine it against a sort of Malbec or a Cabernet Sauvignon. They're really, really deeply coloured. They can be almost inky. This has much less pigmentation to it. So I'd say a 5. Yeah, you're not that far off with 6 or 7. I'll give you that one. But what are the tannins like? The tannins are quite low, aren't they? Yeah, I'd say a 3 out of 10 on tannin. It's actually very similar tannin to that orange wine. It's a very similar point. And it's because of those thinner skins, you're getting less phenolic compounds, so less colour, less tannin. And you're getting less body as well. What does the body feel like on this wine? Does it feel like skimmed milk, or does it feel like full fat milk? Oh, Hannah said that Madrid is the highest capital above sea level in Europe. You know what? Did I put that? Oh no. So we have a few wines from Canopy, and I put that in the trivia for one of them, but not this one. I thought we were matching then. But yeah, really, really high up, isn't it? So this wine is much lower tannin, and the body on it is about the same as tannin. I'd say a 3 out of 10. Yeah? 3, possibly almost a 4, and it's because it has a little bit of malolactic fermentation on it. We've talked about malolactic fermentation, I think we talked about it last month, so I won't talk about it this month, but if you do want me to talk about it, I'll happily send you a very long email. You can feel that little bit of sort of creaminess behind it, but it's very, very subtle, and they've done that to sort of pick up the body just so it's balancing with that tannin. What is the acidity like on this wine? So because we're looking at, again, it's a very similar range to our orange wine, which is really, really interesting. We've gone for that quite low tannin, quite low body. And again, if they're going for a higher acidity, it's a really fresh, drinkable wine. If they're going for that lower acidity, they can still afford to and let it feel balanced. But with this one, it's making my mouth water loads, this one. I think around the same level as the orange, possibly even a little bit more. Really lovely acidity. I think it was about 2-3 seconds before my mouth watered then. I'll just have another test. Oh, yeah, Denise has put skimmed milk. I think it's more of a cross between skimmed milk and semi-skimmed milk, like a 3 out of 10 body, 3 or 4. But yeah, that acidity is really high, so it's a very, very fresh feeling wine, this one. Feels really, really easy drinking. So these are both really good. I like these wines in September when it's sort of trans-seasonal wines. It's like when you're clothes shopping, you never really know what clothes to wear at this time of year. It's the same with wines. You can't quite go for the really full, heavy red wines that are like a hug in wintertime just yet, maybe soon. It's sort of nice in between. And sweetness, dry. Finish, how long can you taste this one for? i.e., how great is it? Yeah. So when we're talking about the things that this wine told us, sandy soils, 45-year-old vines, those 45-year-old vines are really, really old vines. That's when the wine's coming into their own. And because these are old vines and they're in sandy soils which don't have much nutrients, the grapes are going to be very small and concentrated. It's not going to produce many grapes in the vine because it's old and slowing down, and because it's in difficult conditions. So those few grapes that it's going to grow, rather than sharing out all its resources and tastiness and sugar. It's just going to concentrate those down to those few. So it's going to make a really great quality grape transferring into a great quality wine. So it's going to have that really nice long finish and concentration to it. I made a lovely tomato sauce last night and I used really lovely quality tomatoes. So my tomato sauce was a really lovely quality. It's just like making wine, almost. So the finish on that one, I got about 8 or 9 seconds. I think probably 9 seconds on that one, which is really, really wonderful. Such a lovely length. And the aromas on this one, going back to the things we know about our wine, aged for 3 months in French oak. So we want to get some of those fresh fruit flavours from this left-hand side. We want some of the brightness to it. We want that balance, that youth. But then we're going to have some of the more complex things in this right-hand circle. And that's because it's new French oak that they use. So old oak is barely going to add any flavours. It's got old, it's not adding new flavours to it anymore. But brand new oak, you can really smell a brand new oak barrel when you see one. And that transfers that taste into the wine, that smell as well. So from French oak, we usually look at getting vanilla, a little bit of baking spices, and almost a sort of cedary chocolate smell as well. And I've written all of those on here. So I've got chocolate, bit of cedar, vanilla at the bottom, and that is from the oak section, that's cedar and vanilla. A little bit of coffee, it's that sort of sweet bitterness to it, just to balance out that chocolate. 'Cause chocolate by itself can sometimes be a bit heavy for a wine, but that bitterness just in there. And then on this side I've got balanced out with blueberry, red cherry, sour cherries, violets, and dried herbs inside there. It's some really lovely savoury dried herbs. So when you're having this wine with food, it's going to pair really well with anything that has lots of dried herbs. Think about lamb with this wine, that acidity cutting straight through the fattiness of lamb, and dried herbs which match perfectly with lamb. It'll be really, really wonderful for that. So, which is your favourite wine between the two? I think what we've learned about both wines as well, it's really been about the skin contact, that skin pigmentation really. And it's all about how much a wine is getting from their skins. So the thicker the skins, the more skin contact you have, the more colour, the more tannin, and the more body you're going to have behind your wine. If you want to come to our event, we have our event on Thursday. There's only 8 tickets left now. But we're really excited. We're going to have everyone drinking in our warehouse. We've been painting and decorating all day, so it looks really nice. Tim said, how do I pick all those things up? Practice. Drinking lots of wine, Tim. So I think the best way to learn about wines, especially when you have 2 similar ones next to each other, which for the first time we've had, because we usually have 2 completely opposite ones, but they've both been very similar in terms of the characteristics on our wine cards. So it's been really sort of nice to compare them against each other and really looking at that skin contact, skin thickness as well. Everyone's saying difficult choice, but Chris Denny says La Bise. I think mine's La Bise as well. I really, really liked it. Really, really nice wine. We also have the orange wine box if you would like it. I also put 10% off the orange wine box in the store if you want to get all the orange wines together. Because I feel like everyone's liking the orange wine. La Bise. Oh, the orange wine was a pleasant surprise. The red wine, nice. They're both equally good. I like La Bise. I like all of them. I change my mind every time. But thank you so much to everyone for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the wines. And if you do have any questions, feel free to email us at hello@thewinelist.net. And if you have taken pictures of tonight, please do share them with us on Instagram. You can tag @the_winelist. And the best picture that we see tonight, we will give a bottle of wine to. So I hope they're really, really good. I'll pick a nice bottle of wine as well. A real nice one. We've got 2 votes for the same again. Oh, they're always so even every month. But thank you so much to everyone. I will love and leave you. But have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of your wines. And don't forget to have a glass of water before you go to bed. Goodbye.